Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for being on. I know you didn't used to do many podcasts. Like you didn't used to do any podcasts at all. Like you actually seem kind of anti-podcast and now you're doing a bunch of them. So tell me like how did that change happen?
I was very anti-podcast for a lot of years, largely because it just felt like everyone and their dog was trying to start a podcast. They didn't feel the content didn't feel good to me. A lot of them just kind of felt like people trying to start them and force them into, a square peg into a round hole. And I didn't like what the space was becoming. I actually did my first podcast in 2020. My publisher was the one that pushed me to do it. And after that, I kind of figured I was done doing them again. So about a couple of weeks ago is when I decided I was going to start recording podcasts. And really the reason why I did it is because I feel like social media has fallen off in the sense of it's not as authentic as it used to be. And I think it's harder to have the genuine conversations that I was trying to spur on social media, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like now the best way to have a conversation and discuss issues that I feel are important or worth talking about are through the podcast
Mm-hmm.
sphere. I still won't be starting one myself. It's not something I think I'm passionate enough about to actually engage in my own
Yeah,
project with,
I
but
was gonna
I'm
ask.
definitely I'm definitely open to appearing on more of them. I'm still being very selective. But yeah, largely it's because I feel like podcasts are where the good conversations are happening these days, and I'd like to be a part of those.
Yeah, and a lot of times when people are really good at writing, they're actually like such introverts. They're not that good at like making, real time like conversations, but you're not like that. So you could very much start your own podcast. And I think it would be pretty, like, I would definitely follow it.
I appreciate that. And I actually do. Talked about this on one last week. I actually do feel like I speak better in my write than I write for the most part. Um, it is odd that I was so anti them for a long time, but really it just kind of came back to what I was saying. I feel like at the time, social media was still very productive and not so much anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, like, you're right how like everyone and their dog has podcasts. I mean, I kind of thought of that too when I wanted to start mine. I was like, do I really want to like, I was like, I don't care. Like, I enjoy doing it. For me, my favorite thing about doing a podcast is being able to connect with people that otherwise I would not, you know? Like, I'm an
100%.
ex-model and now I'm like studying psychology. Like, how am I going to connect with this person in, Europe or even like in LA or like the rest of the states where, there would just like not be this like common ground of me like reaching out to them and be like, hey, I actually like want to talk to you. Can we like talk? It would just like be weird, But
I
now that I
used to
have a podcast platform, that's a normal thing. Like, hey, do you want to talk on my podcast? So I kind of like use my podcast as an excuse to connect with people that I admire.
And I think that's probably the best way to use it. That's the one thing I have said to a lot of hosts is I do envy the ease of which you can have conversations with people you otherwise would never cross paths with in your
Exactly.
daily life. Um, I used to use social media really heavily that way. I think Instagram still does open a lot of doors for me. And I mean, I don't want to get this twisted. Like I'm not hating on social media in any way. I still use that Instagram very actively. I'm still active on Twitter. It's just not what it used to be. But yeah, as far as opening doors, it's a great platform for that. And I have met numerous people I never would have met otherwise. I've had a lot of
Right.
connections through, just business and life in general through social media, whether I was doing like my old stranger danger contests I used to host, or just like the DMs that I get every day. I'm surprised by some of the people that DM me still on a regular basis. About once or twice a week, I'll get a DM from someone that I respect or consider, a role model for some of the work I've done will
Yeah.
actually write me, and I'll be amazed that they actually follow me, and then we'll start this conversation and develop a friendship.
Yeah. No, it's really cool what, this like technology, social media, all of these ways. Like the best thing that it's brought us, I think, is being able to connect with people that really otherwise we wouldn't even know they exist, let alone like
Hmm.
connect with and, add them to your network, be friends. So, also you moved to Florida. You left us. Why did you leave us for Miami? I'm sure you have very good reasons.
What do you mean by you? California?
Mm-hmm.
My time in California is very short lived. I never really considered myself part of California. I've moved a lot growing up. I actually moved to LA from New York City. I never really connected with LA. It was something where I was trying to force. I moved there to pursue my career, but also because my girlfriend at the time was living in LA and I was in New York. I wanted to be closer to her, and
Yeah.
I never connected with it. I was just kind of counting down the days till I could get out. And then
Wow.
this whole, this whole world bullshit that went down in 2020 was like the last nail in the coffin to really convince me to leave. So I actually went from California to Vegas for a year because I had some career opportunities there. But the whole plan all along was to get back to the East Coast. We just didn't know where on the East Coast we wanted to be. And then as, things further developed, Miami and anywhere in Florida kind of felt like the right choice. I love the East Coast. I've always preferred, just living in the time zone alone. I prefer better than the West Coast. My girlfriend loves the beach, and so Miami's kind of that perfect mix of East Coast lifestyle plus the beach, and then,
Plus some
obviously with
peacocks.
yeah, wild peacocks over the neighborhood, iguanas. I was just watching my dog chase iguanas out of the back door before we hopped on, actually. Um, yeah, and having a new son, it's just a great place to raise a child. There's a lot of culture here. I enjoy walking around an area where a lot of the languages I don't understand, and there's a lot of different influence here, be it Latin or European. I like being around that. I feel like it challenges me to grow as a person, and it also just feels like more of a melting pot that I want to be around. And so Miami, I could list a lot of reasons why we moved to Miami, but I love it here, and it was the right move for me at the time.
What didn't you like about LA so much that you felt like it was so forced and you never felt like,
I don't
like you
like
belong here?
uh, a lot of things. Um, I don't like the traffic for one. Everyone complains about that. I don't like the city itself. I just, how you go to certain cities and just the way they're laid out, you just
Yeah.
enjoy them. Like if I
Yeah.
go to Boston, if I'm in downtown Boston, I just love the way Boston feels.
Yeah.
LA doesn't have that feeling for me. It never had that feeling for me. In my early 20s, I used to spend a lot of time in Hollywood when I was in kind of the music scene, and I loved it then. But going back in my early 30s, it just nothing about it connected with me. I don't like the vibe, the energy. A lot of people like to talk shit on the people, which I think you can find shitty people anywhere. I actually have a lot of good friends that still live in California. A lot of my best friends are still in California. My girlfriend's family's still in California. So it's not the people per se. It's just the vibe in general. It didn't suit me.
Yeah.
I like the East Coast mentality. I feel like the East Coast gets a bad rap in the sense that a lot of people say East Coasters are rude. I would counteract that and say they just have shit to do. People are busy here. They're busy. So like during the day, if you're walking in New York City, a lot of people pass you very quickly and people take that as a sign of rudeness. They just got places to be. They got shit to do. When I lived in New York City and I would go to bars after office hours, I love the fact that it could be me and a banker and a blue collar worker and a tourist. Like it could be 4 or 5 different people all sitting at the same bar top in a city in New York, and you don't get that a lot of places. LA is very pocketed to where I feel like if you go to a bar or restaurant in LA, it attracts kind of one crowd. Whereas,
Yeah.
New York or other East Coast, you go to a bar and there's always like a lot of different individuals. There's no real pocketed, this restaurant's just for this type of individual, which I think you get a lot of in LA. So I had a hard time just feeling like LA was really, it just didn't feel connected in that sense to me.
Yeah. No, yeah, I 100% agree with you. Like, I remember, I don't know when this was, because I've been following you for a really long time. Like, I want to say since maybe 2017. And
That
like,
is that is that is a long time. That's unfortunate for you. I'm sorry.
why? That is a really long time.
No, I
18, 19,
appreciate
20, 20. That's 5 years.
that support. I appreciate that. That's awesome. So you've seen a lot of my journey and progression and the changes I've made as a writer and an individual. That's cool.
A
Thank you
hundred
for that.
percent. And I remember, like, I don't remember when this was, but you went to San Fran and you had these posts of like just random houses. And I loved that post, like, because there was so much personality and so much like character in these houses. And like, you never see that in these like modern homes that are like, supposed to be so cool in LA and they just like have no soul. But like in that post, you can really see that, like, obviously you have an eye for that and like enough to post about it, and B, you really like get to see how, like the infrastructure and like just like a different vibe of each city, and you're like, we don't have that in LA. I mean, yeah, we have like some
You
cool like old Hollywood houses here and there, like you see some like cool stuff, But yeah, you're right. The vibe is, maybe not there as much.
There is a good amount of Victorian style homes in LA. They're just very, like I said, pocketed.
Yeah.
There's like a heritage park area where they actually relocated some of them, but nothing like San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco is a hard to compare city when it comes to most, because during the early 1900s, so many cool homes were built there. A lot of them were lost in the earthquake and the subsequent fire. So a lot of the homes that are still standing were actually built after that fire. Before that, there was probably a
A lot
phenomenal
more.
amount of homes that we're never going to see. But yeah, taking photos of architecture is something I always do when I travel. A lot of people like to connect with nature, which I do as well. I find it more inspiring to be around architecture because I like seeing what other humans had the eye to create and build.
Yeah.
And I also like the patience that goes into architecture, because building a home like that in the early 1900s, it wasn't something you busted out in a year or two. Those were 10-year, 15-year builds. And I love that someone had the vision and the patience to see that project through. So that's where a lot of my appreciation from architecture comes from. So that's again why I like the East Coast. There's a lot of that in the East Coast. Surprisingly, there's a lot of it in Miami. I didn't realize how much there was down
Really?
here.
Hmm.
Homes from the early 1900s. A lot of the Spanish Revival style. Um, so that's largely what attracts me to the East Coast. But also when I travel in general, I always creep other people's houses. I have no shame in stopping in front of someone's house and taking a photo of it. I've had people I've had people come out and say hi to me. I've had people be kind of
Oh,
weirded
cool.
out by it, but I just have no shame. I'll say, "Hey, I love your house. I'm just taking some photos of
Yeah.
it." Some people might think I'm casing the joint for something, to go down later, but it's something I always do. Even, today I went on a walk with my son this morning and I took a photo of a couple houses. I do it everywhere I go. And then every so often I'll, compile, 10 or 12 together, like you talked about the Instagram post, and share them with people because it's a lost art. I had a tweet where I wrote that billionaires for the most part are fucking boring because they build these mega mansions that are all white. And I don't understand why you would do that when you could buy a castle with a moat and have, some creepy groundskeeper.
Yes.
There's so many structures that I think are
So
better
true.
suited for someone of that kind of wealth. I mean, Inya did it right. Inya lives in I think it's Scotland. She lives in a big castle in Scotland. That's what I'd love to see more people do, rather than tear these homes down and build these, 3-story white mansions with infinity pools. Buy a house that has history to it, restore it, bring it up to date. I understand that you want certain things like running water and electricity, but just some respect for what
Figure
went
it
into
out.
building that home. Just respect what went into building that home. I'd love to see that stick around more.
Yeah, like that's just like taste. Yeah, I never got that either. Like so many times we go to like these like really dope houses that are like millions of dollars, and I'm just like, like I mean, yeah, it's expensive and like it's impressive that you can like buy this. Sure, it's like a flex of like, look at how much money I have. But like it's not really cool. Like as you said, like somewhere that has some history, or if it looks like it was built with a different taste that was like from way back when. Um, is a lot cooler. But a lot of people seem to not think that way, and that's fine.
It's just that old saying, they say money can buy possessions, but it can't buy style.
Right. Exactly. So, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your childhood. Like, what was your childhood like? You were raised as a Mormon, right?
Hmm. I was.
So I want to know how that was. How was it getting out of it? How did your family handle it? And kind of like it's a few questions into one. How did that background and being raised, the way you were, how did it influence your writing?
I was raised Mormon. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah for most of my life. I kind of started pushing away from it when I was like 13, 14, when I kind of started, being able to understand my own thought processes and direction in life. By the time I was 16 or 17, I would consider myself kind of fully out of it, which at the time was hard for my parents. Caused a big riff in my relationship with them for a year or so. But to their, grace, they did a lot of, work and therapy themselves to
Hmm.
understand why I chose to leave something they thought was right for me. And we have a great relationship now. Both of my brothers are also no longer in the church, and all of us have a very tight knit family. But as I get older, I realize how much that upbringing affected me in ways that I didn't think were negative, in the sense that
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I was raised teaching, how do I say this? I was raised with a sense of suppression in the sense that I didn't talk a lot about what was going on to me, because as a Mormon, if like you're doing something that's against the church, you're supposed to, kind of confess, similar to a Catholic, but you confess to your bishop, who then might talk to your parents if he feels like it's worthy of, parental, involvement, which I never liked the idea that I had to confess my life to someone who wasn't even a member of my family. So I learned to suppress a lot of things. And that's still something that I unpack to this day. My relationship now, like I still have a tendency to suppress my feelings or my emotions about things, because during those formative years, that's what I was doing. As far as my writing, I think it benefited me greatly, though, because at an early age, I was thinking outside of my scope of influence, and I was trying to understand the world the way I wanted to see the world. And so my sense of humor and a lot of my early writing came from just my ability to interpret things differently. And that was me kind of forcing myself to see the world outside of my religion. So I don't have much bad to say about my upbringing. I actually feel like it made me who I am today. And I think that's the case with a lot of our past. Even if you had something really traumatic happen to you, if you're able to come to peace with it or come to terms with it, and how it's, either made you a stronger individual, give you a better work ethic. There's so many ways that stuff can positively affect you. And once you come to peace with it, your past no longer bothers you. So I have nothing wrong to say about the religion, in the sense that I think it, fucked me up. But I mean, I have this whole thing about organized religion in general, not specifically the Mormon Church. I'm just not a fan of organized religion. So um, I think I answered a question. I'm not exactly sure what you had roped in there as well, but that kind of is, the 10,000-foot view of what I view as how my Mormon upbringing contributed to my career.
Yeah, because you do have a very unique sense of humor. Like it's like a little bit twisted. It's a little dark. It's very unique. I enjoy it
It's
a lot,
it's just
and
honest. That's all it is. It's honest.
it is honest. Yeah, it's very honest, and like it just seems like this person who's writing these like has a cool story that has shaped his sense of humor and his like character to be the way it is. And then I found out you were raised as a Mormon. I was like, huh, I wonder if that has anything to do, which obviously it does. Like, how could it not?
I would say early on too, especially in my late teens, early 20s, a lot of what I did was fueled by rebellion. So a lot of it was trying to rebel against the way I was raised, which I think you see very common with people who are raised in any kind of, very devout
Yeah.
religion. Um, so I think a lot of my crassness and what the darker sense of humor probably came from me rebelling against things, which eventually just kind of became like, my go-to. So there is a way in which it directly reflected the kind of humor I was getting into, or the kind of stuff I was attracted to early on was the kind of humor that was really
Yeah.
considered taboo by the way I was raised. So I was always attracted to um, that realm, just because I was held back from it early on.
And so, for those of you who don't know, Kyle is a writer. He has these two really dope books out. He's got fucking history and speech therapy. Um, Definitely check these out. I just started this one. I just got it, and I already like it. They're so easy to read. Like it's just like perfect when you don't want to commit to an hour of reading and you just kind of want to like your food's getting ready and you have like 10 minutes 15 minutes and you don't want to scroll on your phone. You just like they're like tiny little stories, but they're really like they've got a lot of insight, a lot of wisdom in them, and they're really fun to read, really easy to understand. And so yeah, like get his books. They're both really really awesome. And I also wanted to ask you, like, how did you start as a writer?
I grew up in a very creative household. My father was an artist. My mom was a writer. And my parents actually did a couple children's books together. So
Oh,
growing
cool.
up early on, I was encouraged to draw, to paint, to read. Um, as a kid, when we were doing our chores, my mom would sometimes give us the option: you could read a book to earn your allowance, or you could mow the lawn. I always opted for the reading the book route. So by the time I was in high school, I'd read all the classics. My
Wow,
mom and
I
I
love
both have
her.
Yeah, it was a great, I think it was a brilliant thing she did. My mom and I both have a real appreciation for Mark Twain because I grew up reading all that stuff with her because that's one of her favorite authors. But yeah, she bought me all the classics, you know, The Count of Monte Cristo, The Invisible Man, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, like all that old classic,
Nice.
you know, Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. I was reading all of
Wow.
those in junior high and grade school because that's what I was really driven towards. Was I liked novels and I liked just inhabiting like this crazy imaginative realm that these writers had back then. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, I was obsessed with growing up, especially in landlocked Utah. The whole mystery of the deep ocean really appealed to me. So I grew up in that sense. I really wanted to get into music though. I started playing drums as a teenager and I thought I was going to be in a band. That was kind of my ultimate goal. Um, and then I kind of took a little detour because I'm a bigger dude. I'm 6'6". I was pushed into sports early on. I actually ended up getting a football scholarship in college, and I played a little bit of college football. Football, I wanted nothing to do with it. It was never something I was interested in. I more or less just did
Yeah.
it because it was expected of me. I basically partied away 2 years of school, didn't do anything, and I had to start college all over again. And when I came back and started college again, is when I realized I had a real appreciation for writing. I enjoyed
Mm.
writing thesis papers. I enjoyed writing research papers. Like I actually enjoyed the stuff that most of the other students hated. And I was always getting A's on my papers. And a lot of it I attribute to my mom, the way she raised me.
Oh yeah.
And because of that, I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to write. And
I
so
love it.
I started writing for a local magazine, doing music reviews, and then I started writing for some local nutrition companies, like writing like, you know, emails and stuff. And I eventually got an advertising, which was probably, if you're a writer trying to make money, advertising is probably one of the best routes for you to make a living as a writer. It's not always the most enjoyable, but once I got into that realm is when I actually started seeing some real success for my work.
Is that when you went to
Um,
Vegas?
I started doing that in Salt Lake. I worked
Mm.
at an advertising firm in Salt Lake for several years. I eventually did move to Vegas for my career. I got a job working for a lot of casinos, which eventually moved me to New York City, where I was a
Mhm.
creative director and writer for several hospitality brands, consumer products. I've worked on a couple political campaigns, never anyone that, you know, I blatantly disagreed with, and I've never worked for pharmaceutical companies. I've still had you know, a boundary in what I'm willing to work for in
Yeah.
the advertising world. But on the
Good for
side
you.
of that, on the side of that is when I was writing my own books, I had this captain persona online, and that captain persona was me tweeting the kind of stuff I couldn't get away with writing in scripts, or I would write a TV script with a funny joke and the client wouldn't like it, so I'd tweet the joke instead. And I realized I enjoyed that more. So as that got more and more popular, my dad pushed me to put my first book together. And then from there, it just kind of kept, you know, full steam ahead. I ended up writing, I've done 7 books now. There's 5 currently available. 2 of them are out of print. Um, and now the captain is the more or less the bulk of my writing is what I do there, where it
Yeah.
used to be the opposite, where most of my work was advertising. I still do a lot of advertising. I take a couple contracts a year, and I have a lot of good clients that still come back to me. A lot of people have probably seen commercials I've written on TV, and I still enjoy that. It's challenging, and I like that it kind of forces me to stay current. But my ultimate goal is to get to a place where I'm just writing, you know, 1 book a year, really ingraining myself deep into a story, and just focusing, you know, 100% on being what I consider an actual author. I still don't consider myself an author because I haven't written a novel. I'm very much a writer, but once I get a couple novels under my belt, I'll graciously call myself an author. But until then, um, I'm just going to keep
Do
doing
you?
what I'm doing. But yeah, my writing career kind of just it came together very naturally and organically for me.
Yeah. Um, you don't have to write a novel to be an author, do you?
That's just the way I perceive things. I have all these little weird things I get hung up on, and for me, I don't like calling myself an author unless you've actually created a story from nothing, which is what I
Yeah.
enjoy about novels. It's what I enjoy
Mm.
about novels, and any writer will tell you there's a huge difference between writing a novel and writing a nonfiction book.
Yeah.
There's a reason why a lot of novels suck. They are not easy to write.
What do you think is the most special thing about your writing? Like, what do you think like sets you apart as a writer?
Hopefully, the same thing that sets most good writers apart, and that's my willingness to be honest and authentic and vulnerable in my work. And any good writer will know that the best work comes from you being willing to talk about things no one else wants to talk about. So
Yeah.
I would say that's what I have going for me, and that's what every other very good writer has going for them as well, is just authenticity.
Yeah. You know, something that I enjoy a lot about your writing is that you make very unexpected connections between things. Like, as you're reading something, you have no idea where it's gonna go. And then somehow, like, it really like goes another way. And then at the end, it comes together and it makes a very sensible connection. But, you know, as you're reading it, you don't really know where this is going, and it's very unexpected.
That
So
just
I
makes the
think,
writing, that just makes the process fun. Um,
yeah,
I do try to do that quite often, where I lead people down one path and then I switch it up on them and bring it all back around.
yeah.
Um, it's something that I really enjoy the challenge of. Um,
There's
and
like
so
this
yeah,
element of surprise.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I think that just makes the writing more enjoyable for the reader as well. Is to be able to have that kind of surprise. It's almost like, the surprise ending to a good movie.
Yeah,
Creatives need that kind of stuff in their work. It motivates you, plus it makes the audience enjoy it as well.
yeah, for sure. Like I noticed that that's also like my favorite thing when comedians do it, where
Mm,
like a very like unexpected joke, you know, like you had no idea that's where that was gonna go. So I feel like whenever the element of surprise is used creatively, it can be really powerful. And you definitely like harness that in your writing, which I think makes it really fun to read.
thank you.
Um, who's Ashley, by the way?
Ashley is. I've actually never answered this question publicly before. Um, yeah, for those of you who don't know, I dedicate all my books to Ashley, and it happened when I was in San Francisco one time. Actually, I was talking to an individual who was commenting on the amount of tattoos I had, and he said something like, "Oh, at least you don't have someone's name tattooed onto you. You might regret that." And I thought, you know what? I'm going to tattoo someone's name on me because I don't really care. I have so many random tattoos at this point. So I just Googled crazy white girls in my phone, and Ashley came up number one on the list. And I figured everyone knows at least one Ashley. And so it just seemed like a really good name to get tattooed on me. So I actually have it tattooed on this wrist. I actually have Ashley tattooed right here.
Oh, it's like
Um,
right there too. Like you
yeah,
didn't
well,
even hide it.
I wanted it to look like something like a boyfriend would actually do at some point. So I randomly tattooed the name on me. And since then, I've been using it as like the go-to name for all my dedications. And yeah, that's kind of how it came about. It's just a name that was very randomly chosen, and everyone knows an Ashley, and so it seems very. And for a long time, I made up stories about it. Like people would ask me questions at the bar, and I'd find clever ways to talk about her. And it was just something I did early on that I've kind of stuck around with.
I mean, it's one thing to entertain the idea of someone challenging you to get a tattoo of a random name. It's a whole nother thing to get that tattoo.
So
It's a whole nother thing to dedicate all of your books
he
to
didn't
this
actually.
made up
He did.
person.
I mean, to be honest, he didn't challenge me. I accepted the challenge
Right.
myself. He just
Yeah.
made a comment, and I turned it into a challenge. I actually have another tattoo of a former employer's face on my ass because one of the advertising agencies I worked for, it was our job to put together a charitable auction every year for the United Way. And I had this idea that most of the people who attend these auctions, they don't want more stuff. They're fairly well off. They want funny stories to tell. They want experiences. So my contribution to the auction is I auctioned off a palm-sized portion of my ass, and I said I would get a tattoo of whatever they wanted. And it was the highest selling auction item they've ever had. My former boss was the one that got it, donated for the auction to get it, and he handed me a picture of himself, 20 years younger and very handsome, and I went and tattooed it on me the next day. Um,
Did he
and
know
I
you're
joked
getting
that,
it on your butt?
yeah, that was the deal. Like it was very obvious. I will tattoo whatever you want on my right ass cheek,
Oh
and
my god.
yeah, so now he's
It was
with me
like a picture
forever.
of me. He chose a picture
Yeah,
of himself.
he could have chosen whatever he wanted. That was the deal, and that's what he chose, and so I have it, and it was
Hilarious.
for the children, and I have no regrets about it. I think a lot of people overthink their tattoos. I have so many at this point that I'm not bothered by them in the least amount. I forget I have half the ones I have anyway. So if I have an opportunity to do something good, like that actually raised quite a bit of money, that
Yeah,
idea, I'm more than willing to do it.
I love that. That is a good cause. But to bring it back to Ashley, how did your girlfriend take that?
She thinks it's funny. She's not bothered about it at all. She still thinks it's
I
funny.
love
She
it.
still jokes about it. I've changed the way I dedicate books towards her now because obviously I'm in a relationship. I have a new son. So I'm not dedicating things to her the same way I was. I more or less talk shit on her now in all my dedications, but she still is very much there. And at some point, I'll move away and I'll dedicate books to someone else. Most likely when I start getting into the fiction realm. But yeah, she's as far as my current nonfiction work is concerned, she's always going to be a part of it.
Do you have a tattoo of her name?
No, I do not.
Does she push you to get it?
No, she does not. I don't think she's concerned about that at all. She doesn't have any tattoos herself, so it's not really something
Mm.
that we share a passion for.
So she's not jealous of this made up Ashley person saying like,
No,
"Oh, you have Ashley, you should get mine."
no, she's got her head on very straight. She's not concerned about trivial stuff like that.
And how would you say like having children has changed you as not just a writer, but like just as a man, as a person?
Having my son has relaxed me in a way that I don't think anything else could have. Um, I've said this before. When you have a kid, all the small trivial shit that you care about day to day no longer matters. I don't have time for gossip in my life. I don't entertain a bunch of meaningless drama. And it's really just focused a lot of my short term thinking into long term thinking, which has
Did you
helped me
used
make.
to, sorry to interrupt, but did you used to do those things before you had a child?
I think everyone does. I
Hmm.
think anyone that says they're completely immune to it is bullshitting themselves. If you've been alone for a certain amount of time, you get hung up on weird little things and you get too stuck on just how things affect you directly. You don't have that outside perspective,
Right.
or you don't have that dependence of another individual. I told my what buddy of mine recently who's been single for a long time. I said you at least need to get a dog. You need something to come into your life. You need something to fuck up your
Responsibility.
routine. You just need something to fuck up your routine. You need something to show you that not everything is going to be perfect all the time. That you're going to have to reorganize your schedule. And pets are great at doing that. But having a child just compounds that. But then you have this intense love that you would never have felt otherwise. And I think being a dad's the greatest thing that's happened to my career. A lot of people
Mm.
fear that having a child is going to hinder their career, and that's only if you let it. Um,
Yeah.
I find more inspiration in being a dad, and like I said, I have this long-term strategy now with a lot of my work. It's helped me make better business decisions. I've had better opportunities come my way because I have a different way of thinking about the world now. Um, Anyone who is fearful that a child is going to ruin their life, to me, just isn't creative enough. If you get creative, you can find a way to make everything work. You look at all the, I tell this to friends of mine. If you look at all the people you look up to, whether it be an athlete or a musician or, some celebrity, most of them have children and they've still found ways to make these incredible lives for themselves because they're creative and they find ways to work around it. And yeah, some of them have the financial means as well, but early on in their lives they didn't. And so I think using a child as a crutch to not accomplish your dreams is fucking pathetic.
Yeah. And what would you say would be like an example of, let's say, how you used to do something, like whether it's in your life or in your writing before you had a kid, and now it's changed it for like, a better way or like a more creative way? Like, what would be like something that just like, off the top of your head you could think of?
I think I'm more outspoken now as a father, particularly with what we've all dealt with the past 2 years. In the past, I would have been overly concerned with how saying some controversial things might have affected my career. But having a child, I'm more concerned with him being able to look back and be proud of his dad and what his dad did with his life, and the fact that he was willing to be honest at all times is more important than me than, you know, dealing with some blowback online. And so I'm more outspoken, I'm more honest, and I feel much more sure of myself as a father because I want my son to be proud of the example I'm setting for him.
Mm. I love that because a lot of times, especially when you're younger, like you're looking for a center, right? You're looking to like have a center in yourself where even like no matter how far you get, you always bring yourself back to that center, right? So it
Mhm.
sounds like having a kid has given you kind of like that center. So it's like whatever you do, whatever you say, that's what you keep in mind, right? Like being a good father, being a good example for my kid.
Yeah, and people talk about, I was telling my girlfriend this a couple weeks ago. If you want to meet someone who truly doesn't give a fuck, it's a parent. Everyone likes to think they have, everyone likes to say, oh, I don't give a fuck what people think about me. No, you do. The people who really don't give a fuck are parents, though, because their kids come first. And that's why you see parents take kids into nice restaurants. Guess what? They don't give a shit what you think about them. All they care about is having a fun meal with their kid. That right there is a level of I don't give a fuck that a lot of people will never have unless they're a parent. So I think you look at parents and people think, oh, you know, they've gotten soft. I think it's the exact opposite. There's nothing that trains you or gets you more ready for not caring about the whole of society or what their opinions are of you when you have a kid, because what you really care about is what your kid thinks of you. And you care
Yeah.
about you care about your kids' memories, and you care about how their future is going to be. And if other people want to talk shit on you, you don't care. So
Hmm.
if you want to, you know, take your life to this next level of not being concerned by others' opinions, have a kid.
Yeah.
It naturally will do that to you.
And I love that perspective just because you don't hear that often. What you usually hear is when people are getting married or if they're having kids. Like there's just like a bunch of like negativity so much that's thrown like, oh, consider your life over. Or now you're never gonna have time to yourself. Or,
Hmm?
like you're never gonna be able to do the things that you liked and you enjoyed anymore because all of your existence is now summarized and revolving around this kid. And you hear that so much and it implements so much fear in people, but it's so good to hear this other perspective of this person who says like, well, it's not always like that. It could also like make you a better person, a better version of you.
I fell victim to that negative headspace when I first found out I was going to be a father because I hadn't really had an example in my life of someone to show me otherwise, in the sense that, as far as my peer group's concerned, I'm one of my first friends to become a father. And I didn't have a lot of people to lean on. So I was getting a lot of outside opinion about it. But I had a conversation with an old buddy of mine I connected with who has 5 kids. And he really helped me shift my thinking on things. And after that, I realized if you lean into something, if you lean into a change in your life, you're going to find a way to make it work. It's that in between stage where we're in limbo and we're pushing back on a change, whether it be like the end of a relationship, a career, layoff. When you push back on something you don't want to happen, you always make it worse.
Yeah.
And
Because
by
you're
pushing
timid.
back, yeah, by pushing back on the idea that this kid is going to come into your life and fuck things up, and you're like trying to resist that happening, you make it worse. Lean into being a parent, and you get so much joy out of it. And I'm more productive now because I know that I have a set time frame to get things done. So rather than waste an hour or two fucking around online, I know, okay, I have 2 hours to get this written. I crank work out now so much faster. I wrote my last book in probably half the time I've written in the other book because I wrote it at night. Once my girlfriend and my son were in bed, I had 5-6 hours to myself every night. I would write, and I did that every night for weeks on end, and I was able to crank out this whole book. Whereas if I didn't have that in my life, I would have taken my
Yeah.
time, I would have
Yeah.
dragged my feet. Um, so by leaning into the whole inconvenience, as people would call it, it's made me more productive because the frames I do have to get work done, I get shit done.
Yeah. And this is a little bit more of a personal question. Feel free if you don't want to answer it. But how come you and your girlfriend are not married?
But we just haven't had that conversation yet. I mean, it's something we've talked about loosely here and there. Um, we're just not to that point. We're not ready for it. It's not something we feel we need right now. We're still working out a lot of things. We actually broke up for 6 months back in 2019. So we're still discovering a lot about each other, helping each other heal from, past experiences in our life. And it's just not something we're ready to jump into and don't feel we have to right now.
Yeah. A lot of people feel the pressure and the need to, when they want to have a kid, to like, well, you have to get married, you have to get married.
No.
And so, like, did you feel that pressure?
No. Marriage isn't going to make your kid happy. What's going to make your kid happy is parents who respect each other. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's, better off parents are apart. Sometimes that's better that parents are married. But forcing yourself to do something like that for the sake of your kid doesn't benefit that kid at all. What that kid needs is love and an
Yeah.
example of respect in their life. And if they have that, you can have the most weird, diverse
Yeah.
relationship. And as long as that child's provided with that, that kid's going to be stoked, because how many people do you know that stayed married for the kids and it
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
benefit the kids? And
So many.
the kids get older and wish their parents would have divorced because they had to
Yeah.
see these horrible examples of fighting and this, just this overall sense of tension that didn't need to be there, that the parents thought had to be there. So I would advise anyone, you don't have to do that to have a kid. You don't have to do that to make your kid happy. I mean, my upbringing was very different than my girl's upbringing. She has several, half sisters, half brothers. I come from a very traditional family, and our parents loved us and showed us love in different ways, and we have different things that our parents did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it doesn't have anything to do with the structure. It's just what we were,
Yeah.
set as an example.
Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of coming up with your own rules. Whenever you find someone that you guys are together, like, don't feel like, because so many people are traditional and they want to go the traditional way. And, like, obviously everybody feels the pressures that society and like our family puts on us. Like, you have to get married, you have to get married before having kids. But it's also like, also feel free to come up with your own rules and your own structures and figure out what works out best for you and your partner, even if it doesn't work out for the rest of the society, you know?
Absolutely. If you want that traditional structure, awesome, more power to you. But you shouldn't feel that you have to have it.
I agree. You mentioned 2019, so I actually wanted to ask you about that. What happened in 2019?
2019 is when I took a hiatus from social media and became very open about my own struggles with mental health. For many years, you were following me back in 2017. I had a job that had me traveling a lot. I was on airplanes every other day. I was traveling to bars and hotels. I had this very fun lifestyle,
We also
and
didn't know your name. Like, you were
yeah,
just the
yeah,
captain. Like,
and I didn't
I
have,
didn't know, I
yeah,
didn't know you. Like, I think I like super randomly went on your page one time and I saw your name and I was like, that wasn't there.
yeah. It was not
Like, I
there. It was
remember
not
I
there.
had that moment where I was like, I never knew this guy's name. So,
Yeah. So prior to 2019, I was very guarded in my personal life. I shared a lot of my career stuff, and I just neglected so much of myself during those years that I eventually just had a breakdown. I moved to LA. I was struggling to get my career to where I wanted it to be, and I just started ruminating on all this negative shit in my life, and I just went down to a very deep depressive hole. And I think it was July 30th of 2019. I just confessed it to everyone on Instagram. I said, listen, I'm
mhm,
dealing with some shit. My mental health is not in a good place. And I took a break, and I came back. And when I deleted all the apps from my phone. I did nothing with social media for a month. And during that time, I just sat with myself. I read, I went to therapy. I focused on eating healthy. I didn't drink any alcohol for over 100 days, because I really just wanted to figure out why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And I wanted to force myself to actually process it instead of numb it or hide it behind something else. And when I came back to social media, I made the promise to myself that I was going to come back and be very honest about all of it. So that's when I decided to put my real name on my page. And I got very open about mental health and speaking about, the suicidal thoughts that I dealt with for a while. And the amount of support that I received from that just motivated me further to be more honest and vulnerable in my work. And those two books you have, if you look at Fucking History versus Speech Therapy, both are written in very similar styles, but speech therapy is much more personal and it's much more heartfelt, whereas Fucking History was more of an entertaining style of writing. I was doing a lot more of the joke and a lot more of the bantering that you
Yeah.
talked about earlier. Whereas speech therapy, I really wanted that book to be something you could go to for actual therapy. When you don't have someone to talk to, that book can talk to you. And that's why I wrote it the way I did. And that's why I called it what I called it. It's meant to be like a conversation with a close friend. And I had someone write me just 2 days ago saying their dog died and they didn't know who to talk to about it, but they read the chapter on that in my book and it helped them a lot. And that's exactly what I wanted to do with that book. That book is so you always have someone to turn to talk about things that are going to happen to all of us, the things that fuck up our days, fuck up our weeks, and potentially fuck up our lives. By going to that book, you can read a quick conversational piece, taking a lot from my own experience, and
Mm.
hopefully, laugh, find some hope to move on and get past it and have that mental, or I should say, that emotional management to help you get past that and realize life's never over.
Yeah, and 100% I agree with that. And I want to know, like, did you ever have any like history of mental health issues, or was it just, in that era of your life?
I think I probably always had them. I just ignored them.
Mm.
I think a lot of it just came down to me choosing to ignore it, which just prolongs the process and compounds the problem. Um, I think what everyone can benefit from if you're dealing with any kind of depression or anxiety or stress is a routine. I used to push very hard against routine. I thought that a lot of my creativity came from a spontaneous lifestyle. When I realized all it did is kind of fed all the negative parts of my thoughts. Routine has helped me tremendously.
Yeah.
Getting up early, getting on a walk, and forcing myself to read a certain amount of pages every day. A buddy of mine developed this program called 75 Hard, which I did last fall, and I felt more unstoppable than ever. And since then,
What is that?
it's a program where you don't drink alcohol for 75 days. You work out twice a day. You read 10 pages. You drink a gallon of water, and you do that every day for 75 days straight. No breaks, no time off. And the whole purpose of doing it is, first, it feels fucking impossible at first. It proves to you can do something hard, and it also helps you master the monotony of small wins every day. And at the
Yeah.
end of that 75 days, you feel unstoppable. And that's true with everything. Like if you can just rack up small wins, or if you can just focus on mastering small tasks every day. Like I always used to write to-do lists every day. That's something I learned from my dad early on. I'd get up in the morning, I'd write a to-do list, and I put every little thing on there. Like I'd put dumb shit on there, like drop off the mail or put gas in my truck, like things I needed to get done. And at the end of every day, if you can look back and see all the things you accomplished, you feel better. And that's how that's why I believe everyone can benefit from routine. If
Yeah.
you just do that, your anxiety is going to go down because you're not forgetting things anymore. You have them on to-do list. Your stress is going to be more manageable. And if you're dealing with depression, I promise you, if you can stick to a routine and master small things, your depression will get better.
Yeah, well, the thing you mentioned about the list, a task list, when you cross out a task out of your list, you literally release happiness
Mm-hmm.
hormones. Like that act of like crossing it out is so like there's so much pleasure. Like I have lists to like every day, and I don't even like putting it in apps because it like the feeling of just doing that with a pen is like so rewarding. But also what you're talking about, this is like studied in psychology like very much. Like people call it momentum, but
Mm-hmm.
um it's actually a positive feedback loop. When you like, even when you like wake up in the morning, like do something simple, like wash the dishes, something like you can like just have off of your mind, out of your mind. It's like a weight that's off of your shoulders. It gives you that like positive feedback loop where then you have more of a momentum to take the next step, towards doing something else that needs to be done. And when you rack up these points in your own mind, you start respecting yourself, you start liking yourself, and then you start like imagining yourself doing all of these things that are harder that you thought like, oh, I can't do that. Like read 10 pages a day? Oh, fuck no. But then when you slowly like do the little things, they add up, they build
Mm-hmm.
confidence. They build
100%.
so much confidence.
See, I have my book with me right now. I keep this book with me everywhere. And every day I'm writing checklists. I don't know if you can see, but I'm marking stuff off every day. I have it always next to me whenever I'm sitting down somewhere, and as I think of things to add to my list, I add them. And as I knock stuff off, whether it's like answer an email, follow up with someone, I just cross it off. It's something that I find tremendously beneficial for exactly the
Yeah.
reason you said.
Yeah. And I want to ask you like, cuz I'm like trying to write too a little, like not to become a writer or anything, but I just think writing is so attractive to me. Like it's just such a skill that like I love building, and I just like enjoy doing it so much. And a lot of times when I'm like driving, cuz I drive 5 hours to visit my family up north in Bay Area. And a lot of times when I'm driving, I like to drive in like silence. It's kind of weird, but like, I get like all of these ideas when I'm in silence that otherwise I wouldn't. If I'm listening to music, I'm singing along. If I'm listening to podcasts, like information's going in, nothing's really like coming out. But when I drive in silence, I get like so many ideas. And I think, well, I can't pull over, because then
I
I would
pull over.
have, I would have
I
to, but then, so I wanted to ask you that, like, what do you do as a writer? Because I
I
know you get random thoughts that you need to, like, do you wait until you get to your destination? Because that's never worked for me. If I
I
get to my
pull
destination,
over.
I forget.
I pull over often and put notes in my phone. I text stuff to myself. I like voice text myself just so the text goes back with the idea, or I'll jump in and I'll put it in my little note app on my phone. I've done that before where I've thought, oh, by the time I get to the destination, I'll remember it. And it's about a 50-50 shot, you will. A lot of times it just leaves your mind for some reason. So I do whatever I can to capitalize on it in the moment, jot it down, write it down, voice note myself, which you could easily do while you're driving. Um, that's something I've talked about in other podcasts as well. That moment of creation that is hard to put your finger on. I find that if I'm experiencing a writer's block, for example, there's never been a writer's block that I haven't been able to defeat by doing some kind of activity in the form of exercise. And so if I ever feel like stuck on a writing project, I go for a walk. I go to the gym and use the elliptical. I ride the stationary bike. I do something like that, like similar to driving. I do something that's very monotonous that allows me to zone out, but also like get my heart rate up.
Mm.
And I've always been able to defeat whatever writer's block is in my way doing that. Sometimes it takes 10 minutes, sometimes it takes 45 minutes, but I've never had it not work for me. And as soon as I get it, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm done. I got what I needed out of it, and then I go back to my project.
So what would you say like helps you the most with like writing creatively? Like what's been like your biggest, like if you wanted to, you know, give like some sort of an advice to, like younger kids who let's say want to grow up to be a writer. Like what would you say has helped you become like such a creative writer? What's like, do you have like a, like a hidden little, like things like a secret, anything of that? So a secret tip.
I think the biggest mistake that up and coming writers make is they write for their audience and not for themselves. I
Mm,
think that the best advice I could give anyone in writing is write for yourself first and foremost. Write what you want to write about, write what feels right to you, and people will resonate with it if you write it in a very vulnerable, honest fashion. It's the times that you try to write for other people that you'll do your worst work. You
yeah.
overthink it, you start writing for the sake of likes, you start writing to get attention, and that writing is hollow and people can see through it, and you might get attention in the short term, but there's no longevity in writing like that. So if you want to write creatively, write what appeals to you. Like if sci-fi appeals to you, write sci-fi. If you want to write some romance novels, write romance novels, but write what you want to write. Don't write what you think you need to. That's the best way to be creative, because you'll never tap into your creativity trying to be something other than yourself.
And that's like a bad advice that a lot of times people give when people are looking to find a career or a major when they're in school. A lot of times, like the parents or even counselors at school, they say, well, look at what's lacking in society, right? Like, look at what's doing well and, do that. And it's like, that's the worst
That
fucking tip ever.
that works for business. It doesn't work for creativity. It doesn't work for artists. It doesn't work for writers. It doesn't work for musicians. It works for business. It works for economics.
Yeah.
It works from the standpoint of like an entrepreneur. But any artist, musician, or writer will tell you that's not the way to go about it, and that's not the way you're going to produce work that's worth anything.
Do you have time for one more question?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you, what like what do you find attractive? Like what is attractive to you when you look at people, when you look at art, when you look at writing? What is like the one like most important thing that you look for in something or someone?
I like risk. I
Mm,
like people that are willing to take risks, whether it's the way they dress or just presenting themselves as a very authentic individual is risky in this day and age. I like art that takes risks. I like writing that takes risks. I like music
mhm.
that takes risks. I like seeing people take a risk because most of the time when you're taking a risk, you're taking a chance on yourself and you're being your most authentic version, or you're presenting something that you feel strongly about. And so when I see someone do that, if it's someone that has like really unique fashion, I love that. It might be something that I don't I would never wear, but I fucking love to see it. And I love seeing art that's controversial. I love seeing musicians take stands that are controversial because it means they care. And I think that's more attractive than anything.
And how have you implemented that? Like, how would you say you've implemented that in yourself as a person or in your work?
I think my work kind of speaks for itself in that regard.
Yeah.
I write plenty of things that people disagree with. The only time I've ever felt regret for something I wrote is when I wrote something that I might not have agreed with 100%, which early on in my career and also my advertising career, I wrote stuff for the sake of appeasing clients or the
Yeah.
sake of appealing to an audience. And that's the only time I've ever regretted my work. When I write something that I believe is funny or that I believe is honest, I don't care who disagrees with it. And that's just something that comes with time. I think that's
Yeah.
a lot of people shy away from being creative because criticism's hard to take. Trust me, you definitely get used to it. And once you've done it a few times, you will get more confident and criticism won't bother you. Um, and that's again why I like, well, it all goes back to what I just said about seeing people take risks. Um, every time you take a risk, you risk being criticized. And that's why it's
Yeah.
so brave to do it. And that's why it's so attractive to do it.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. It's like originality is what I personally find the most attractive in anything, like in art, people, any piece of work I see, I'm always looking for originality. And you know what you're saying is very similar to what I'm thinking also.
Hmm.
And it's like somehow that's just, when you see that like freedom in people's characters or in their work where it's like, I like it. You might not like it, that's fine. I hope you do. But if you didn't, it's totally cool. But like, I really like it. And this is how I want to present myself out in society on a day to day basis, whether it's my fashion, my hair, or my personality, or my work. And it's, yeah, as you said, it's like that risk that really shows your authenticity.
100% agree.
100%. Kyle Creek, thank you so much. What do you want to like? Why don't you tell people where they can find you? Like, what's your social media? Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, if you search SGRSTK, that's my handle on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or if you just search the Captain on any one of those platforms, you should be able to find my work fairly easily. If you go to Amazon, type in speech therapy or fucking history, you'll find my author page as well. Thanks for having me on. This is a fun conversation.
It really was. Thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. You too. Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye, everyone.